You think you're the only one aching. You think you're the only one carrying a burden. No, everyone's bleeding, and most are doing it quietly. That's the way of this world, harsh, fast, and utterly indifferent. The first keynote, a sober acknowledgement of reality, open with the raw truth. The world is indifferent to personal suffering. Life is not fair, and people are not always kind, sets the tone for something most people spend their lives trying to avoid, the unfiltered, unsoftened truth. There is something deeply jarring, almost offensive, about hearing someone say out loud that your pain does not move the world. It clashes with the narratives we're fed, that we matter, that our hurt matters, that somewhere out there is a soft place that will catch us when we fall. But the truth, as it often is, stands in quiet contradiction to those illusions. The truth is this: most people don't care. They're too caught up in their own pain, their own worries, their own survival. They have their own crosses to bear, their own sleepless nights, their own burdens pressing hard against their ribs. When someone walks past you on the street, they don't see the grief in your eyes or the weight on your shoulders. They're looking at the same world you are, with the same tired eyes and weary heart. That's not cruelty. That's just reality. There's something oddly freeing about recognizing that life doesn't owe you fairness. It doesn't owe you comfort or clarity or understanding. People don't have to be kind. Circumstances don't have to line up just right. The storms don't need your permission to come, and the ground doesn't ask before it crumbles beneath you. And when we stop expecting that kind of fairness, when we stop waiting for someone to rescue us or validate our hurt, something changes. We begin to see life not as a series of injustices against us, but as a relentless tide we were born to face. We stop being surprised by the pain and start building endurance through it. It's not that your suffering isn't real. It's not that what happened to you doesn't matter, but what matters more is how you live through it, how you walk with it. The world isn't going to stop and give you a trophy for surviving another bad day. It's not going to part the seas just because your heart is heavy. That's a harsh thing to say, but it's a necessary one, because too many people stay stuck in grief, stuck in anger, stuck in confusion, waiting for life to acknowledge them. Waiting for someone to say, yes, I see you. Yes, your pain is valid. Yes, you deserve a break. But what if that voice never comes? What if no one ever shows up to hand you justice or comfort or even a kind word? This world is loud and fast and full of broken people, and in the middle of all that noise, you are one more soul trying to keep your head above water. That doesn't make you meaningless, but it does mean you're not exempt from struggle. You're not so unique in your suffering that the rules don't apply to you. That sounds cold, but it's actually a kind of mercy. Because when you stop waiting for the world to care, you start to grow strong. You stop wasting energy looking for sympathy in people who barely have the energy to hold themselves together. You stop yelling into the void, hoping it'll echo back something healing. You stop leaning on a hope that the world will get easier or more gentle just because you're tired. And if you're honest deep down, you already know all this. You've seen it. You've lived it. Maybe you lost someone and the world just kept moving. Maybe you were betrayed and no one came to your defense. Maybe you hit rock bottom and expected at least one hand to reach down, but none did. These moments don't lie. They're brutal and raw, but they're real. They teach us something no book, no speech, no therapist can fully instill. Life doesn't bend to our pain. And the sooner we stop expecting it to, the sooner we start standing up on our own legs. There is strength in that kind of brutal honesty, not the strength of denial, not the kind that puts on a mask and pretends everything's fine. No, this is deeper. This is the strength that comes from walking into the storm without flinching, from staring into the face of suffering and saying, "You don't get to break me." It's the kind of strength that makes no excuses, takes no shortcuts, and asks for no applause. It just keeps going, one scar at a time, one breath at a time, and yes, sometimes it feels lonely, because we were made to be seen, we were made to be known. There's nothing wrong with wanting someone to understand you, to walk with you. But that can't be the foundation, because people will fail you, even the good ones, even the ones who love you. And if your ability to keep going is built on whether or not someone notices your tears, you will fall. Not once, but over and over again. So this is where we begin, with truth, not comfort, not sentiment. Truth, the world is indifferent to your pain. Life is not fair. People are not always kind. But you were not made to be carried. You were made to carry, to bear the weight, to endure, not in bitterness, not in self-pity, but in fierce, quiet strength. That's where we start. That's how we move forward, because if we don't begin with truth, everything else will crumble. Self-pity is one of the most deceptive and quietly destructive attitudes a person can carry. It doesn't show up with flashing lights or loud accusations. It's subtle. It whispers. It slinks into your thoughts when the lights are out and life hasn't gone the way you planned. It doesn't always look ugly at first. Sometimes it feels like honesty. Sometimes it even dresses itself up as humility. I've been through so much. I've suffered deeply. I deserve at least a little comfort, a little recognition. And it's right there, in that soft, almost convincing tone, where the danger lies. See, self-pity is not just a response to pain. It's a fixation on it. It's what happens when we not only acknowledge our suffering, which is healthy, but we begin to exalt it. We start building a home around it, identifying ourselves by it, feeding it like it's some kind of wounded pet, and before long, the pain becomes our lens, our crutch, even our excuse. We begin to say, "You don't understand what I've been through," as a way to excuse our passivity. We start believing that our trials make us unique in a way that demands special treatment. But that's not humility, that's not strength, that's pride wearing a broken mask. There is a kind of pride that doesn't shout. It doesn't strut, it just sits in the corner with a wounded expression and expects the world to adjust to it. It's a pride that says, because I have suffered, I am now owed. It's a misplaced expectation, a subtle belief that because life has been hard, it should now reward you, or at least stop being so cruel. But suffering doesn't entitle us to anything. Pain doesn't make us righteous. It doesn't buy us immunity from the rest of life's challenges. In fact, if we're not careful, pain can harden us, make us selfish, make us blind to the needs of others. Because when all you see is your own hurt, you lose the ability to see anything else clearly. Self-pity takes a wound, a real wound, and turns it into a throne. It convinces you that you're the only one hurting, the only one struggling, and therefore you shouldn't have to move or act or rise. It tells you to sit down and wait for someone else to fix it, someone else to understand, someone else to come and tell you, yes, you were wronged, you deserve to be rescued. But here's the truth, rescue may not come. At least not in the way you imagine, and if you waste your time waiting for it, you will miss your chance to become stronger in the pain. You'll miss the growth. You'll miss the clarity that comes when you realize no one is coming, and that it's your move to make. Always has been. There is a time to grieve, there is a time to be still, but that is not the same thing as marinating in self-pity. Grief is real, rest is necessary, but self-pity is a choice. It's a decision to remain in a place of helplessness long after help has been offered. It's not always about what others have done to you. Often, it's about what you've refused to do with the pain. Have you let it make you softer, more merciful, more alert to the sufferings of others? Or have you let it become a badge you wear, a wall you hide behind? You see, we've been trained by culture to believe that vulnerability equals virtue, that just being broken makes you somehow deep or important. But vulnerability is not a destination, it's a beginning. It's what you admit before you rise, before you rebuild, before you begin the long journey back to strength. Self-pity, on the other hand, says, this is where I'll stay, this is where I deserve to stay. But the moment you begin to believe that your pain gives you a right to check out, to stop fighting, to fold your arms and blame the world, that's the moment your suffering starts to own you. And that is a tragedy greater than the pain itself. And let's not pretend we don't feed it. Sometimes we talk about our pain to anyone who will listen, not because we need help, but because we want affirmation. We want people to say, you're right, that was unfair, you poor thing, and maybe it was unfair. Maybe it really was brutal, but what good is the sympathy of others if you're using it as a substitute for progress? What good is attention if it keeps you from action? The truth is, too many people are addicted to feeling sorry for themselves because it's easier than taking responsibility. It's easier than changing. It's easier than doing the hard, thankless work of becoming a person who refuses to be defined by wounds. If you listen closely, self-pity always has the same language. It says, I shouldn't have to go through this. It says, I've done enough. It says, someone else should fix this. But life doesn't bend to that. Growth doesn't answer that voice, and nothing truly meaningful ever came from someone who built their identity around what they've lost or how bad they've had it. It comes from those who refused to let their sorrow become their story, who took the blows, wiped the blood from their mouth, and said, I will not be ruled by this. And then yes, there's a cost. It costs you your excuses. It costs you the comfort of being the victim. It costs you the sympathy of others who might prefer you weak and wounded. But what you gain is far greater. You gain your freedom. You gain the strength to stand without applause, without pity, without needing someone to validate your suffering. And that's where real strength begins, not in avoiding pain, but in refusing to be owned by it. So when self-pity comes knocking, recognize it for what it is. It's not your friend. It's not helping you. It is the voice that keeps you small, that keeps you passive, that keeps you from becoming what you were meant to be. And no matter how justified it feels, it will never lead you anywhere worth going. There comes a point where pain is no longer just something you experience. It becomes something you answer. It shows up again and again, sometimes expected, sometimes out of nowhere, but it always leaves you with a choice. And this is where the call to maturity begins, not in avoiding pain, not in pretending it doesn't exist, but in choosing to face it, to stand in it, and not let it rule you. Because if you let it, pain will become your master. It will shape how you see everything. It will twist your view of the world, of people, of your own worth. It will become the filter through which you interpret every moment. But it doesn't have to be that way. Growing stronger doesn't mean becoming numb. It doesn't mean shutting down or pretending that everything is fine when it's not. It means looking pain in the eye and saying, you can walk with me, but you don't get to drive. It means refusing to hand over the steering wheel of your life to something that was only ever meant to pass through. Pain is a teacher, yes, but it's not meant to be your identity. It's a storm, not your home. The world we live in glorifies comfort. Everything around us tells us that the goal is ease, happiness, instant gratification. But the moment life breaks that rhythm, and it always does, we panic. We assume something is wrong. We think we're failing, but what if the breaking is part of becoming? What if maturity isn't about escaping hardship, but walking through it without losing your soul? You don't become strong by being spared. You become strong by being stretched. Real endurance is forged in pressure. You don't build calluses without friction. You don't gain patience without delay. You don't learn perseverance unless you're given the opportunity to quit and choose not to. We've confused growth with comfort, and that's why so many people stay stuck. They think maturity just happens with time, but it doesn't. Time can make you bitter just as easily as it can make you wise. It's not the years, it's what you do with them. It's whether or not you decide to let pain refine you instead of define you. There are people who go through horrible things and come out softer, kinder, more grounded. There are others who go through the same and come out angry, entitled, and cynical. The difference isn't what happened to them. The difference is what they chose to do with it. And choice, hear this clearly, choice is where your power is. You don't get to choose all the pain. You don't get to control what breaks around you or even inside you, but you always choose your response, and that's where maturity begins. Endurance is not glamorous. It's not something you can post about or display for others to admire. It's the quiet, hidden decision to keep showing up day after day when everything in you wants to lie down and give up. It's when your heart feels heavy, your body feels tired, and your mind is screaming at you to stop. But you keep going, not out of pride, not out of fear, but out of conviction, out of the deep, unshakable knowledge that your life is not meant to be dictated by temporary pain. That's what it means to grow stronger. This isn't about pretending to be tough. It's not about putting on a brave face or swallowing your emotions. It's about standing in truth, and the truth is, your pain is real. Your scars are real, but so is your strength, so is your ability to grow. You were not created to collapse under pressure. You were created with the capacity to endure, to learn, to change. Maturity doesn't come by accident. It's a choice, 1,000 choices really. Stop waiting for life to get easier and to start becoming someone who can thrive even when it's hard. Some people think maturity is about gaining knowledge or acting calm. But real maturity is about ownership. It's about owning your emotions, your actions, your path forward. It's saying, this pain doesn't give me permission to lash out. This trial doesn't excuse bitterness. This disappointment doesn't allow me to stop trying. That's hard. It's so much easier to let our pain speak for us, to let our wounds justify our reactions. But easy is never the way to growth. Endurance is the long, quiet work of becoming the kind of person pain can't destroy. There's nothing noble in staying wounded. There's nothing mature about constantly pointing to your scars like they're a reason to stay broken. At some point, healing becomes your responsibility, and no, that's not unfair. That's freedom, because as long as you wait for someone else to fix you, you're stuck. But the moment you decide, I will not be a prisoner to this pain, you take your power back. That's not denying the pain. That's denying its right to control your future. People who endure aren't superhuman. They just stopped expecting the path to be smooth. They accepted that pain was part of the story and chose to walk it anyway. They stopped asking, why me? And started asking, who can I become because of this? They don't always feel strong. Most days, they probably don't. But they keep going, and that's what matters. That's what maturity looks like. It's not loud, it's not dramatic, it's steady, it's faithful, it shows up even when no one's watching. Your story will be shaped not just by what happens to you, but by how you carry it. Will you let the pain shrink you, or will you let it stretch you? Will you allow it to turn you inward, or will you let it open your eyes to others? Maturity says, I don't have the luxury of staying the same. It says, I will not let this moment break me when it could be building me. And true endurance, is what happens when you live that out day after day, until the pain no longer defines you, but becomes part of the foundation you stand on. Pain may visit you, but it doesn't have to stay. And even if it lingers, it doesn't have to lead. You were meant to grow stronger, not by erasing the pain, but by walking through it, refusing to be mastered by it. That is where your strength is born. That is where your story begins to change. There is something deep in the human heart that aches to be seen, to be heard, to be understood. It's natural, it's honest, but if you let it grow unchecked, that desire mutates into something darker, something desperate. It becomes a craving, not for healing, not for growth, but for validation. You stop wanting to be better and start wanting to be pitied. You start needing someone to recognize your pain, to acknowledge your suffering, to reassure you that you're the victim, that you're justified in staying where you are, and that's a dangerous place to live. Because validation feels like nourishment, but it's not. It's empty. It's a sugar high. It gives you a moment of satisfaction, a moment where you feel seen. But it fades, it always fades, and when it does, you're left needing more. So you go looking again, dropping hints about your suffering, sharing your struggle not because you need help, but because you need someone to say, you're strong, you're amazing, you're enough. And then you're trapped in a cycle that looks like vulnerability, but it's not. It's performance, and the worst part is, it feels real. It feels like connection, but it's just noise. It's just the echo chamber of your own pain bouncing off other wounded people who are too busy looking for their own validation to offer you anything real. And yet, we've been taught to do this. The culture tells us, speak your truth, share your story, be vulnerable, and there's value in that until it becomes your identity, until the need to be affirmed replaces the need to be transformed. Because there is a massive difference between being honest and being addicted to attention. One leads to growth, the other leads to stagnation, and the more you build your life around being noticed, the less capable you are of moving forward without applause. People aren't always going to clap for you. They won't always understand you. They won't always pat you on the back or say, you're doing great. And if your strength depends on their recognition, then you're not strong. You're just rehearsing a role, waiting for someone else to approve of your pain. But pain doesn't need an audience to be real. You don't need to be validated to be valuable. And if you keep chasing sympathy like it's a prize, you'll miss the point entirely. Sympathy doesn't change you, attention doesn't heal you, and validation doesn't build endurance. It just keeps you emotionally dependent on others to feel whole. There's a certain honesty you have to reach where you can look at yourself and say, I am not owed attention, not for my suffering, not for my struggle, not even for my survival, because when you expect to be praised for holding on, you turn something sacred, your endurance, into something transactional. You begin to treat your journey like a resume. You list your pain like credentials, hoping someone will be impressed, but pain isn't a platform, it's not a badge, and it's not a tool to manipulate people into liking you more or treating you differently. When you make validation your goal, you slowly begin to edit yourself. You start telling your story in a way that gets the best reaction. You exaggerate some details, leave out others. You stop being raw and start being curated. You present your struggle with just enough detail to look brave, just enough emotion to get a reaction, but not enough truth to bring change, and it feels good for a moment, until you realize it's not real connection, just a mirage. Just people clapping for a version of you that you've constructed to meet their expectations. And don't get it twisted, validation isn't always loud, it doesn't always look like a spotlight, sometimes it's quiet. It's that secret hope that someone will finally understand you, that they'll look at you and say, I get it, you've been through so much, you deserve to be treated differently. But here's the thing, nobody gets to live their life waiting for someone else to get it, because not everyone will. Some people won't understand you, some won't care, some will walk right past your wounds like they're invisible. And if your sense of worth depends on being understood, you'll always be waiting, always disappointed, always trying to earn something that was never meant to be the foundation of your life. You don't need the world to applaud your pain. You need the strength to carry it without needing anyone to notice. That's not bitterness, that's freedom, that's maturity. That's when you know you've stopped chasing validation and started walking in truth. Because truth says, this hurts, but I don't need your sympathy to keep going. Truth says, I'm broken, but I don't need your attention to heal. Truth says, I know who I am, even if no one else does. That kind of strength is rare. But it's real. When you stop chasing validation, you start living with clarity. You stop trying to prove something to everyone. You stop telling stories to gain approval. You stop editing yourself down to be palatable or impressive. You just live. You just work, you just grow, and you realize that some of the strongest people are the ones no one notices. They don't get the likes, they don't get the praise, they just wake up every day and do what needs to be done. They suffer in silence, not because they're hiding, but because they don't need the noise. They've learned that attention doesn't equal transformation. They've learned that the only applause that matters is the sound of their own heart refusing to quit. There's a kind of peace that comes when you let go of needing others to see you, when you finally understand that their validation was never going to be enough, that it was always a distraction, because validation is a moving target. One day you have it, the next day you don't, and if your confidence is built on it, you'll live in constant fear of losing it. But when you reject the need for it, when you really let it go, you become untouchable. Not in a proud way, not in a cold way, but in a steady, grounded way. You start walking through life with your head up, not because people are looking at you, but because you finally stopped needing them to. You were not made to sit in the center of your emotions. You were not built to orbit endlessly around how you feel, what you lack, or who hasn't noticed your pain. That's not living, that's drifting. That's what happens when your focus is misaligned. When you turn inward too long, you begin to shrink. The voice inside grows louder than the truth outside. You stop seeing the road ahead and start staring at your wounds. And while there's a time to reflect, there's also a time to lift your head and move. Not because it's easy, not because you feel strong, but because there is something more important than your feelings, your purpose. Purpose is what pulls you out of the spiral. Purpose reorients your eyes, straightens your spine, and teaches your hands to keep working even when your heart is breaking. It gives weight to the struggle and meaning to the silence. And the truth is, you don't always have to feel like you're doing something great in order to actually be doing something great. Sometimes greatness looks like faithfulness, like waking up and choosing to move forward when every part of you wants to stay buried in your emotions. Discipline is not a denial of emotion, it's a redirection. It's a refusal to let emotion be your compass. It's saying, I feel this, but I'm not led by this. You will never rise if all your energy is poured into deciphering how you feel every minute of the day. Feelings are real, but they're not reliable. They're waves, they crash and recede, and if you try to build a life on waves, you'll drown. Purpose, on the other hand, is steady. Purpose doesn't shout the loudest. It doesn't demand your attention like pain does. It waits. It sits there quietly in the corner while you wrestle and cry and complain. And when you're done, when you're tired of being tired, it simply asks, are you ready to return? Because purpose won't beg. It won't compete with your distractions, but it will always be there, waiting for your eyes to turn back. There's a deep transformation that begins to take root when you stop asking, how do I feel? And start asking, what am I here to do? That shift, it changes everything. It doesn't make the pain disappear, but it gives it context. It doesn't remove the weight, but it gives you a reason to carry it. Some of the most powerful growth you will ever experience will come when you stop reacting and start deciding. When you realize your life was not meant to be tossed around by every emotional storm, when you stop chasing affirmation and start building character, you cannot serve your emotions and your mission at the same time. One will always demand more from you than the other. Emotion wants to be felt, explored, analyzed, coddled, but your mission, your purpose, it wants to be carried, it wants to be honored, it demands action, consistency, and endurance. And if you want to become the person you were created to be, you will have to choose. You will have to decide that your calling matters more than your comfort, that your future is worth more than your fleeting thoughts. Discipline is what keeps you going when the fire goes out, when motivation is gone, when applause is silent. Discipline is what makes transformation possible. It's what takes hope and turns it into progress. And the thing is, you don't have to feel like it to do it. You just have to show up when it hurts, show up when no one's watching, show up when your emotions tell you it's not worth it, because discipline doesn't ask for your permission. It doesn't need you to be in the mood, it just needs your decision. Transformation isn't dramatic. It doesn't happen all at once, it's slow, it's tedious, it's the result of choosing something higher again and again, until the lower things start to lose their grip. It's waking up one day and realizing the things that used to control you no longer do, that your emotions, while still present, are no longer in charge, that your focus, once scattered, has become sharp. You begin to see with clarity what you once only saw through the fog of self-pity and distraction, and it's not because the pain vanished, but because you stopped living at its feet. This life is not about who sees you. It's not about how understood you are or how validated you feel. That's a small life, a shallow one. You were made for more than just being seen. You were made to do something with what you've been given. Even the pain, even the struggle, every scar you carry, every moment of weakness, every hidden battle, it can all be turned into strength if you let it push you toward purpose. But you have to lift your eyes. You have to look beyond your feelings. You have to stop asking who's noticing you and start asking what you're becoming. People spend their lives trying to be understood, and they miss the quiet, hidden work of becoming whole. Because wholeness isn't something others can give you, it's something you build, and you build it when your focus shifts, when the goal stops being emotional comfort and starts being inner transformation. That kind of shift is not easy. It costs something. It costs your excuses. It costs your distractions. It costs your obsession with how things feel. But what you gain in return is far greater. You gain vision. You gain strength. You gain the ability to walk through fire and not be consumed by it. The more your focus sharpens, the more the noise around you begins to fade. You stop caring so much about what others think. You stop checking your reflection in the eyes of people who don't even know your name. You start investing in what matters, in your craft, in your habits, in your inner life, and slowly you become someone who doesn't need external validation to keep going. Someone who is unmoved by the chaos. Someone who has learned the art of fixing their eyes, not on comfort, not on applause, but on purpose. And there is freedom in that. Not the freedom to do whatever you feel like, but the freedom to do what matters, even when you don't feel like it. The freedom to live with conviction instead of confusion. The freedom to rise, not because the road is easy, but because the destination is worth it. That's what happens when you stop looking inward and start pressing onward, when you choose transformation over attention, discipline over emotion, purpose over pain. You begin to see the road for what it is, not a place to feel everything, but a place to become something.